Can we keep her? Welcome to the Hey You Guys podcast. I'm Rob, this is Liam. And this week we covered 1990s Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, or, depending on where you're from, Teenage Mutant Hero Turtles.
Wait, was the film called Hero Turtles?
At some point, it was changed to Hero Turtles. Yes, we'll get into.
I thought that was just a cartoon. Jesus Christ! No, sorry, this is this is big news. I can't even let you get through the intro. I'm like, really? I should be better informed, shouldn't I? Jesus Christ! Sorry, mate.
I'm Liam. No, you're Liam. I'm Rob.
There we go. We're getting there.
We covered 1990s Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles. An independent film, surprisingly, that made $135 million at the box office. The reason why an independent film is after the, let's say, disappointment of Superman 4: A Quest for Peace, no studio wanted to give comic book films a go-ahead. Oh, and also, sorry, I can't forget Howard the Duck in 1988.
Howard the Duck was the big one, wasn't it? Because obviously, you got to remember, like, Howard the Duck was based on a comic book as well. There was a lot of animatronics involved. And similar to this, it was kind of that halfway house between being a film for adults and a film for kids. Like obviously, Howard the Duck had that famous sex scene. So you can imagine, like, Howard the Duck's come out, it's completely flopped. And they're like, how about we do another film just like that? And everyone says no. And I appreciate everyone thinks about it now. It's like, it sounds insane. Why wouldn't any studio finance Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles? It was the biggest thing in the world in 1990. But you got to remember, they were asking for finance a few years earlier. And it wasn't based off the cartoon. It was based off this quite obscure comic book. And people are looking at it like, 4 turtles? And like, you got to remember the comic book was quite violent as well. Hence the fact that the film is actually...
I love the comic book as well, because the comic book was an homage to Daredevil, to Marvel's Daredevil.
Not even
because obviously the Turtles, the ninjas, were like a parody of Daredevil himself. But instead of the hand, you had the foot in Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles. And so they parodied.
Instead of stick, you had Splinter, shit like that.
And I love the original Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles comics. I know this isn't a comic podcast, but as a comic fan, I love the originals. The artwork is fantastic. The story is fantastic. It's so good. I mean, it's done mainly in black and white at the beginning, and it's so good by Peter Laird and Kevin Eastman. Who?
It's still I think, for me at least, the definitive aesthetic of the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles. And I think a lot of people work from that. I think obviously a lot of people our age will remember the cartoon, the Hero Turtles as they were known over here. And I still can't believe that the movie was known as Hero Turtles.
So I'm not too sure what countries, but to follow on from the cartoon, the film was changed to Hero Turtles in certain countries.
Well, the thing is, it's that ship has already sailed. Like, that is one of the things you notice very clearly in this film, is that it's not based on the comic book. This was actually planned to be released before the cartoon in 1987. But because it was so dark and those aforementioned financing issues, it kept getting pushed back. But of course, the die was already set. This was based on that much darker, much more violent, still fun, but much more violent and much more Japanese-centric comic book. And of course, by the time the film comes out in 1990, everyone's accustomed, we're 3 seasons into I think it was a 7-season run of the original cartoon. And everyone's like, oh, it's all cowabunga, it's all day-glow colors, April O'Neil in a yellow trench coat, all that stuff. And then they go and see this film, and like, wait a minute, this is dark. And it's not just tonally dark, it's visually dark. It's shot in it's almost, some of the shots in New York are almost noirish at times.
Well, you say New York, maybe North Carolina, where it was filmed.
Yeah, of course,
It's so good because, as you said, it's filmed in shadow. But it's really weird because it's filmed in shadow, it's dark, it's about ninjas, but then the attitude of the ninjas as well. They're light, they're having fun. Well, obviously, as they call them, they're teenagers. But I still find it hard to get my head around the fact that this was an independent film. It was independently financed because they got, well, maybe not as big back then, but I've always loved him. Like Casey Jones, played by, and I'm going to butcher his name, I always do, Elias Koteas, who...
Yeah, I think, Koteas?
Koteas,
however it's pronounced.
Absolute fantastic character actor. You've got...
They wanted bigger names for him, though, didn't they? They actually wanted, was it Johnny Depp or there was another big name attached to him? Jesus Christ, I had it written down, so I'll get back to it in a minute. But they had some really big names that they wanted for Casey Jones, and they've actually had to kind of, I guess, fall back on him. And he's like, he's a great actor, but he's a character actor.
They did him dirty in the sequels, but we'll get to that in Legacy.
Yeah.
And obviously, the only other name really, well, Judith Hoag was big then as well. She was just filming a film with Robin Williams at the time. Who
I had such a crush on her. Such a crush.
Incidentally, Robin Williams, a massive fan of the Turtles, when he found out that Judith Hoag was coming onto this film, he taught her the law with his own comic collection, his own Turtles comic collection. So that's awesome. That's quite interesting. And obviously,
she's great.
Corey Feldman as the voice of Donatello, who again only paid $1,500 for this because he thought he was doing a favor for people because it's an independent film, and then it goes to make 135 million at the box office.
And 135 million might not sound like huge money now, but make no mistake, this was the biggest independent movie of all time, and remained as such until the Blair Witch Project was released in whatever early 2000s. Yeah. Oh, sorry, 1999. So yeah, this was an absolute beast of a film, and obviously it kind of came off the back of.
I keep saying 135 million. I've cocked that up. The budget was 13.5 million. It made 202.
Which isn't, again, and you think how much it's made since with the sale of VHSs, DVDs, Blu-rays, and all that jazz. But somebody at one of these studios has been shot out of a cannon. This is not quite up there with the person who gave away the toy rights to Lucas for Star Wars. But you can imagine a lot of people just looking at this comic book and just going, what the fuck? This is weird. 4 Turtles. It's really dark. It's got ninjas. It's surprisingly violent. I'm not keen on this at all. And then, of course, by the time the movie comes out, the show is the biggest, legitimately the biggest thing in the world. And it's like, well, yeah, you didn't even have to sell this film. It was already like, it sold itself on the popularity of the cartoon at this point. And I think that was the problem with it. I mentioned earlier, like so many parents are like, oh, I'll take my kid to go and see the super fun, super light-hearted Turtles film. And then they watch, April O'Neil getting slapped around by foot soldiers and Raphael almost getting killed on that rooftop. Like, he gets his ass whooped. Yeah. And some of the stuff, like the relationship between Casey Jones and April O'Neil is fucking bananas. She rarely wears a bra. Maybe that's why I had such a crush on her.
Did you notice the line as well? I mean, typical late 80s, early 90s line as well. When Donatello says to Casey Jones, "Oh, you're a claustrophobic. I've never looked at another man in my life."
No, dude, it means you're scared of enclosed spaces. He's like, oh, okay, yeah. He is not one for the Me Too movement.
No, and obviously, what's he calls April O'Neil toots.
Oh, all sorts. Yeah, the whole thing is like he's out of touch even in 1990, but by today's standards, he's absolutely appalling. Although, like the look is still cool, like the face mask. He's basically
I've always loved him.
He's kind of like what Batman would be if Batman was poor as fuck. It's like that is like his style. It's like, well, I don't have money for the suit or the car, so I'm just gonna have a hockey stick and a mask, and that's it.
And if Batman owned a sporting goods store, like he's got he's got a cricket bat at one point, he's got a baseball bat, a hockey stick, as you said. I mean, I'm pretty sure he's got a field hockey stick in there as well.
But that's the important thing, though, for his character is they're all sticks, and it's something you notice throughout this film is the problem of Leonardo and Raphael. Because they've got stabby weapons. Yeah. They've got sais and swords. So all the time you see them kind of just moving around being like, we can't really use these. Like, you can use nunchucks. You can use Donatello's bow staff. You can use a hockey stick to, whack people on the head. But as soon as you start stabbing, let's be honest, it's not just foot soldiers. Teenagers, that's what they are. Yeah. Like, as soon as you just start stabbing kids, you're like, oh, wait a minute, this isn't cool at all, But obviously Shredder is a little less fussy about it because he is just covered in knives. His whole look is bizarre.
He looks like a tin opener.
He really does. He really does.
So, but on the rewatch of this film, I really enjoyed the rewatch. I mean, I've seen this film.
Me too.
I've seen this film countless times. I've always enjoyed the film. What you do see now, what has aged, is obviously the animatronic or like bits like even though they're in the suit, the faces and the animatronic. Can't say my words at all. So it's all a bit like slow moving for them. So they've had to speed up the frame rate and things for the fighting because they're fighting, 4 guys in latex outfits, like massive latex. So they can't really move. So they're quite cumbersome, but it still looks great.
I see. I was the complete opposite. I thought they did an amazing job. You see a few of the action sequences in particular. I was like, I can't remember the choreography being this good. And they obviously they had a lot of Hong Kong stunt teams, and that was one of the reasons we'll get to later why April O'Neil was a different actress for the sequel, because what was the name of the actress?
Judith Hogue.
Judith Hogue, she had a lot of issues with the fact that basically these guys were coming over from Hong Kong, getting injured in the fight sequences, and then basically just getting shipped back to Hong Kong, just like, well, he's injured, just get rid of him and get someone else in. But when I watched it, I was like, oh, these fight scenes have a fair bit of impact. And I was kind of expecting them to have like really limited movement. I was like, they're doing a pretty good job here. And the one thing that really stood out was just how emotive they were. Like, Jim Henson, who did, famous for, the Muppet, was it the Muppets? It is the Muppets. Yeah, Muppets. All sorts. He was supposedly appalled by how violent the film was, but he was so proud of the work he'd done on the suits. And going back and seeing it, I still think they're the quintessential live action Turtles for me. I still think to this day, that's how they should look.
If anyone says a Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles film or how they look, to me, it's this, because they're my turtles. They're the turtles I watch, the turtles I grew up with.
But I don't think it's just because I was wary of the whole, these are, same as you, my turtles. But I was like, no, these still look the best. And I like the amount of work they had to do.
You mean Michael Bay's CGI turtles on steroids didn't sell it for you?
That was bad. That was bad. But I mean, I was surprised how emotive they were, like how good a job they did with the characters. And that is one of the things like runs throughout the film. It's, obviously you get like the ridiculous lines and stuff and you get the action, but it is quite an emotive movie. The way they deal with Shredder being lost and obviously Raphael not knowing how to deal with his emotions. I was like, they deal with this stuff surprisingly well.
Do you mean Splinter being lost?
What did I say?
Shredder.
Oh, yeah, sorry.
I don't think they'd care if they lost Shredder. I'm just saying.
No, I don't think so. And actually, I thought that what they did with Splinter was aged surprisingly well. I mean, we've mentioned it so many times on this podcast that the late 80s, early 90s films have aged incredibly well because it was the height of physical special effects.
Yeah.
Animatronics were at their peak before there was a reliance upon CG and stuff. And that's one of the reasons, like, there were a few spots when you can feel the budget, but considering it was a big effects movie that was made in 1990 for, what did you say the budget was?
13.5.
I mean, it looks unbelievable. It looks unbelievable.
The only part of Splinter that looked ropey, aside from him on the rooftop at the end when he did his little nunchuck move, but we'll get to when Casey Jones and Danny have him, like you have the injured guy around you, you've got his arm around your shoulder. Yeah, that's when it looked like they were just carrying like a scarecrow. But other than that,
it did. There was that bit.
He does look fun. Like even when he's hung up and he's talking to Danny and he's hung up, he looks like a giant I can't say that word.
Animatronic.
No. The morphic.
Anthropomorphic.
That's the fucking word I want. He looks like a giant one of them.
A giant one of those bitches. Yeah. I mean, in fairness, the only bit which, and I just have to get to the point briefly, that I couldn't believe that Kevin Clash, otherwise known as the voice of Elmo, is also the voice of Splinter, which is, talk about two diametrically opposed voices. Like on one end of the scale, you've got Elmo and his squeaky, I'm Elmo. And at the other end, you've got this kind of like take on, he really does go for the whole Japanese thing. He does it, especially at the end. My favorite is a cowabunga. I made a funny and all that. It's like, I'm not sure if you get away with that in 2022.
Do that. My favorite is a cowabunga in your Elmo voice. Because that's going on the top of our podcast.
It's cowabunga. It's something like that anyway. Jesus, well. But in terms of ropey special effects, the only bit which really started for me were the flashbacks. The flashbacks were dog shit. Like they went for like a stylistic
little rat in the cage and he's learning his moves.
I mean, the way it kind of faded to black was kind of cool. But firstly, I was like, why are they keeping this rat in a bird cage? That's a problem. But then two, like the whole idea, and I'm willing to go on this journey, and sometimes the fact that they do try and make this film grounded does kind of clash and rub up against the fact that it's an absurd premise. But I'm willing to go on this journey that a rat and a bunch of turtles get covered in ooze and then become anthropomorphic. Fine. But this rat was already some kind of super rat long before he was covered in ooze. He was already kind of copying his master's ninja moves when he was just a rat. What the fuck? Yeah, that bit was pretty ropey.
Although that stuck to the comics, because in the TV show, or the animation, it was him himself, wasn't it? He became a rat. Like the ooze mutated him into a rat. But so going back really quickly, and I think I've got you. I'm going to have you stumped here. Did you notice a young actor as a member of the Foot Clan, by any chance?
Oh, you mean the head thug? You mean Sam Rockwell?
I do not. I mean the gentleman who was stood behind Sam Rockwell. I didn't fucking notice this until my last rewatching.
No, I only noticed Sam Rockwell.
There's a guy behind Sam Rockwell with his headband. Mm-hmm. It's Skeet Ulrich, the killer.
Is
Billy.
It really?
Yeah, Billy from Scream.
Oh my god! Yeah, to be honest, mate,
I knew you were going to go Sam Rockwell. I kind of set you up for that.
I mean, it could have been the Queen of England standing behind him. I would have never noticed because I could not see beyond his terrible goatee. I just could not see beyond.
Fantastic. I love the goatee beyond. I love when he's introducing the new guys and he's saying cigarettes are over here, your video games are over here. And it's just so funny. But that goatee.
I've got to ask a question, and maybe I am jumping ahead here, but while we're at that part of the film, I'm not quite sure exactly what Shredder was trying to achieve, because of course Shredder's the bad guy and stuff. But at this point, it's very much a kind of Fagans Lair circa 1990. And if I'm a kid in 1990, I'm like, there's skateboards, there's neon lights, there's totally awesome arcade machines, they're gambling, they're playing pool, they've got cigarettes. I'm like, they're being treated pretty well. Obviously, they have to steal for the privilege.
Yeah.
But I'm like, they're being taught ninjutsu. They're being extolled these like virtues of discipline and hard work. And all the time, beyond obviously training these kids up to work for him, what exactly is Shredder doing that is quite so bad? I don't know in this film what Shredder's big plan is. Like,
you mean the fact he's giving most of the homeless kids a home?
I mean, that's literally what I was thinking. Like, Tatsu as well. There's one scene when he gets upset because he's, kind of disappointed Shredder, and he goes and beats up one of the kids. And I think that's actually directly from the comic books, because in the comic books, there's like a similar kind of scene, but I think the kid dies.
Yeah,
but in this, they kind of made a point to say, "Oh, he's okay though."
No, he was meant to die. In the French version, he was meant to die, but apparently Americans are a bit more susceptible to kids getting killed.
Anything goes. Yeah.
So they added after him breathing to show that he is alive. But in the French version, they kept the original that he did just kill that kid.
Oh, okay. Well, I'll give it. That's pretty bad. But other than Tatsu losing his temper and killing a kid once in a blue moon, for the most part, I was like, I don't know what Shredder's trying to achieve. All I know is he's not keen on turtles. Fair enough. But because there's no like narrative, he only finds out at the end that Shredder is the rat that kind of clawed him afterwards. Like,
again, you said Shredder, Splinter, dude, Splinter.
Oh, sorry, I keep mixing them up. So that only comes in the very final sequence.
Yeah.
So up until then, I'm just like, all right, he's come over from Japan. He's got his outfit on, pretty wild, fair enough. I don't see, I get how ninjas are supposed to be conspicuous. They're the least conspicuous thing in the world if you're in the middle of New York or, as you say, Wyoming or Wilmington, North Carolina. But I'm like, I don't know what his plan is. And I don't think he's that bad.
How did he get that suit through customs?
I have no idea. That hat has to be custom made. Yeah. It has to be custom made. All I can think is like in Batman Begins, he's probably got a bit of money and he's ordered all the pieces individually and he's had to order them in bulk. I'm like, all right.
You got Tetsu going, sir, we've gone through two rival, we've gone through several offshore companies to get you your tin opener.
Yeah. It is 7,000 tin openers, 4,000 cheese graters, and then you just put them all together to make the suits. I don't know what the actual suit's made of. But he is like some kind of chainmail curtain.
He is the biggest MacGuffin in this film. Well, because there's no point in Shredder, except for the fact Shredder is the big bad in the comic. Shredder is Shredder is evil as fuck. But in this, for some reason, he is just a guy who is like, he is one step away from singing a song about how you've got a friend in me to these kids.
Yeah. It's just kind of, he's there and he works as this kind of visual device, but as a narrative device, it just kind of feels like the whole thing is like the Foot Clan rather than Shredder, and they kind of force in this narrative. They're like, oh, Shredder doesn't like the even Tatsu even says at one point, he's like, why do you have this issue with the turtles? And he's like, oh, something about the way you explained the way they fight kind of made me think, that reminds me of a rat which once scratched my face.
I love as well the way I didn't watch them fight. The way you explain, like Tatsu is down to the minute detail explaining how these turtles fight. That he's I know that style.
The way you say sound much like small rat fight. Like, what the fuck, dude? Like, it doesn't make any sense. And again, I think it all comes back to that whole, well, I know it's 1990, but late 80s, early 90s thing of being like, all right, this film's coming in 90 minutes. It's coming in hot at 90 minutes. So we're going to spend most of our time introducing the turtles, and they do not fuck around with that. Like, you get to the turtles super quick. Like, you think at the start, there's going to be this, like, slow release. Because again, it shot very noirish, very dark, a lot of shadows. The city looks pretty grimy. You have April O'Neil in one moment in a yellow trench coat, which is like a cool little nod to the comics and the cartoon.
Well, they wanted to do her in the full yellow jumpsuit, didn't they? From the cartoon.
Yeah, and she wasn't having it.
No,
she wasn't. I think she was already pretty upset about the hair situation because they gave her a perm like in the comics. But you kind of get that hint there that maybe we're going to get this like Batman-esque slow reveal, but then all of a sudden it's like, well, down in the sewers and here's the turtles and we're off to the races. And they really do force feed. They do a pretty good job of adding the kind of background. I mean, as I said, it's not shot in the best way where they establish the history of the characters and how it happened, but they're like, all right, we're just going to force this in. But other than that, we want to get straight to the action. That's exactly what they did.
Yeah, it went a mile a minute because after they After they saved April and they went back to the sewers and they're all just talking to each other and they're doing their cool talking like cowabunga and all this, and then
they don't actually say cowabunga though, do they?
No, they don't. But right? I can't remember what they're saying. But
I just have to ask: is it Splinter? Is that what they're building up to? And then Splinter's the first person to say it at the end of the film.
I thought they said cowabunga some other time in the film.
See, I assumed they did, but then I was watching the film, and then Splinter does. Oh, I always like cowabunga, and they all say cowabunga. I'm like, is that where they spent the whole film saying all those different words? Like, it's like they're making up words. Yeah. And I guess you're watching it as a kid going, why aren't you saying cowabunga? And then eventually they have the big moment at the end when they all say
four of them go cowabunga on the rooftop.
Yeah. I thought that was pretty cool.
I could have sworn they said it, but I love the introduction, and they're having this chat, and they tell Splinter they saved a woman. Their first fight, they did well. And then you then see Raphael, who's the hothead. He lost the sai. He's pissed off. He's lost the sai. And then everything that's happening in the background. Then you've got Mikey on the payphone ordering a pizza.
Yeah. That's cool.
And then Splinter explains to him what's going on about life and everything like that. And I love then when you've got Mikey waiting for his pizza, and he's chewing a random piece of straw or something. Like, they're in New York City. Where did he get the straw? I don't know, but okay.
It looks cool, though. It looks cool.
So he's chewing that, and then Donatello comes up and asks him, do you think what Splinter says? And all he can say is, he's late, $3 off. Like, he doesn't get. And then that poor pizza delivery guy shows up, and he's like, where's 22.5? And that pizza delivery guy was actually Michelangelo. So that pizza
the guy in the suit
is the guy, Michelangelo in the suit. And again, the passenger in the taxi, when Raphael jumps over but that's Raphael. And I believe the other two, Donatello and Leonardo, show up as foot soldiers at some point as well. But
they all
show
have
up
their
as live action. But I do love it. And it's like, this is introduction. So you've got a quick look then of all four attitudes, where Donatello's the overthinker, Leonardo's the one that is basically sucking up to Master Splinter, Raphael's the hothead, Michelangelo's the guy whose head is in the clouds. All he cares about.
They
like
just
you said, they
establish
it, but they go a mile a minute, and they don't even explain. They don't say, right, because in like a lot of the Turtle things you see previously, when they do the introductions, and they go, introduction, Raphael, Brad dude, real. Like
Michelangelo's a party dude and all that jazz.
But they don't do that. You just get that from the brief interactions they have with each other in the first 30 seconds.
I think they probably assume maybe at that point that most people would know who the characters were. They do a good job being like, you get the idea. Like, they have those like brief interactions at the start, and you're like, all right, I know what these kind of archetypes each of those characters are. But what I liked at the start in particular is that there is an emphasis more on Japanese culture, on ninjutsu. It's almost like a kind of like low key. It's very much the Batman Begins of the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles. But one of the things that does run through the film is like that culture clash, because obviously Splinter is very Japanese and he wants them to kind of follow a certain lifestyle. But it is that culture clash between Japanese culture and American culture, because of course they're teenagers growing up in the US and they're obsessed with US culture. And it might not work if Splinter was just this kind of like hardcore, oh, no, it's all about the ninjutsu. But one of the things that really comes through, I think, in the film is he being both their master, but also a father figure. So it's like, oh, God, they're driving me crazy. But he obviously loves them all as a kind of surrogate father. Well, he says, again, without a huge amount of dialogue, that totally comes through.
He has that moment, doesn't he? When they have the whole Japanese, they go on about the Japanese ginsu. It slices, it dices, and they cut the pizza up, and the pizza lands on his head, and he's just one word. He just says, kids. Like, He has that. You went about ninjutsu. I have to say, I love the look of the Foot Clan. Like, when you think of a traditional ninja, it's always the balaclava, but their eyes are clear.
Yeah.
In this one, for some reason, they've got their bug eyes, but then they've got red sashes. So I love the fact that the ninjutsu, then the Foot Clan, are blending into the shadows, because at some point Tatsu says, doesn't he? He goes, ninja, vanish. And apparently they all disappear. But there's no way they can disappear when their red sashes are just like some sort of beacon.
Yeah, well, like I said, I don't think ninjas are doing a very good job of being conspicuous. Like, at the start,
ninjas, again, they're all teenagers. They're all American teenagers. They're not ninjas.
It's quite bizarre, because at the start, it is very much that Oliver Twist thing. When they're going around stealing things, they're not dressed as ninjas early in the film. They're just teenagers, inconspicuous, middle of the road, often white teenagers who are just stealing stuff because they feel disenfranchised or whatever. But then when it cuts to the Foot Clan, I guess they do give you that hint that they're being trained, with Tatsu. Like, he gives that kid like the headband and stuff because, you reached a certain level of training. You're no longer one of the kids on the street stealing TVs. Now you're a foot soldier kind of thing. So again, they give little nods to those, but having like just teenagers run around. And again, it's one of the problems with Leonardo having two swords and Raphael having a side, because make no mistake, if they start just chopping people up, they're killing teenage boys. Like, that's what they're doing. Just like a 6 foot tall turtle stabbing a teenage boy through the heart. It's
look at that massive fight scene that they have in April's dad's antique shop. Poor April's dad's antique shop as well. That's been there for years, and then burnt down 10 minutes into meeting the turtles. But you're right. There's no they've got. It's like Leonardo's hitting them with the side of the sword. Like, he's basically just bitch slapping them with the side of the sword because you can't do it. Yeah,
but then saying that, even despite obviously there not being any blood, there's no two ways about it. You go back and watch this, go, man, some of these fight scenes are quite violent, and the one that still stands out for me is the one on top of. On the rooftop, which is, I'm pretty sure, a set from Big Trouble in Little China, or one of them is anyway, because I know they shot 4 days in New York. The vast majority was set in North Carolina to save money, but two of the I actually think it's the rooftop scene against Shredder. That is a set directly from Big Trouble in Little China, which I actually thought was pretty cool. But I think it's just one of those film where
the Foot Clan's hideout is actually used. There's 2 films. The one is The Crow. That's Top Dollar's.
Yeah. They look really similar.
Yeah, it's Top Dollar's Lair in The Crow. And there was another. I've got it in fact, so I'll say I can't remember the film. Yeah.
I can't back this up, but legitimately, when I was watching it, when they come out the sewer and they go to April's apartment, I was like, that looks like The Crow, because it looks so miserable. Where the antique store and stuff is on the corner, it's clearly a set. Yeah. And I was like, man, that looks like a grim-ass place to live. And of course, everything in The Crow looks grim as fuck. Well, I wouldn't be surprised.
It kind of looks like Gideon's pawn shop from The Crow.
It does, and it is the weird thing, because once they're inside and up on the roof, April O'Neil's apartment actually looks quite nice. Yeah. But when they're outside it has to be that bit from The Crow, because it does. I'm pretty sure it is legitimately the pawn shop, because the windows are all boarded up.
And that's what
it's just like it looked aggressively grim, and far too grim for what eventually turned out to be a quite nice apartment.
You get that from late 80s, early 90s films, don't you? And definitely 70s films. Anything that's ever set in New York, it's always grime, it's grit, there's never any brightness to a New York film or a New York set.
You have to remember, up until Giuliani, and again, this is before Giuliani got involved with Trump and stuff, before Giuliani cleaned up New York City was a dangerous, grimy place. Like, if you go back and watch films from the late 60s, early 70s, you think stuff like Midnight Cowboy or Mean Street. You look at those films and you're like, fuck me, New York looks the worst. And it was because large parts of it were. Like, you wouldn't go to, what's the big park? Central Park.
The one in the middle, yeah?
Yeah, Central Park, that's one. Supposedly it was, especially above like a certain avenue, you're just like, it was absolutely crime-ridden. So even in 1990, there were large parts of New York which were rough as fuck. Of course now, the vast majority is being gentrified and that's where all the money is. But I suspect that even then, parts of it were grim, but they weren't grim like The fucking Crow. They weren't
the film that sets it up for me in regards to, as you said, 70s, dark, grimy, gritty, is always Taxi Driver. Taxi Driver has that. Just like you could chew this, the air.
100%. Well, they took that for. I mean, Joker is basically just Taxi Driver, isn't it? With the Joker kind of thing, in terms of having that similar visual style.
I tried to watch the Joker.
You're not a fan?
Shit, dude.
Oh, really? Oh, yeah. I really like the Joker. I mean, don't get me wrong, it's one of those films I watched once. I was like, I enjoyed that. I don't need to see it again because it's pretty grim. But I'm surprised to hear that. But anyway, that's a whole other conversation.
Yeah, that's by the by.
The Turtles. But speaking of other films, if we are going to mention them, at the start, I was like, beyond the obvious pizza advertisement, which worked really well for me when I was younger, because I'm pretty sure my love and obsession with pizza came largely from the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles. But there's a really unsubtle Burger King advertisement at the start where there's like a Whopper box and a drink on the side. But the one that really got me was Critters being quite so prevalent at the start of this film. Both Critters is showing at the local cinema, and there's a bit where I think it's April O'Neil is walking down the street, and one of the bus stops has a massive Critters poster on it. And it's there for like a good 3 or 4 seconds. And I'm not sure if you guys have ever seen Critters, but it's a great 80s, ridiculous sci-fi horror film. And the poster's absolutely fantastic. Once you see it, you can't unsee it. And we will plays a surprisingly prevalent role at the start of this film.
And at some point in this podcast, we will be covering Critters 1, 2, 3, 4, and the TV show.
Well, no. See, that is the difference between Rob and I. It's like, oh, I want to do Tremors. He wants to do Tremors 1 to 5. It's like, no. Just one is fine. The same with Critters. We will cover Critters. We will not be covering the fucking train wreck which follows.
We might have to do Critters 3 with Leo DiCaprio's first outing.
Absolutely not.
What about Critters 4 in space? We could do a double feature. Critters 4 in space with Leprechaun 4 in space.
Why not? I just throw in, Jason X in space.
I bought Jason X the other day.
You bought it?
Paid for it.
Oh my God, what the fuck, dude? Don't you know any horror series which ends up in space, it means it's jumped the shark unless it started there.
Because it's jumped the shark. It's fun to watch. I mean, there's shit.
I guess. It is shit. I mean, but in fairness, there is a certain joy to be taken from Jason X just because it's so ridiculous. But yeah, we're talking about everything but Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles. It was my fault. I did bring up Critters, in fairness. Bloody hell. But I tell you that what I did like in this film, and I thought worked surprisingly well, because obviously when you think of the Turtles, you think of New York, and I know we've already mentioned that a lot of it was shot in North Carolina. But when they went actually out to
the farm,
April O'Neil's farm, and they had that more emotional moment. I love the fact that, again, you talk about character building. I thought it was a really clever narrative device where April was drawing the characters. So again, a nod to the comics and the cartoon. She was doing these cool little drawings while explaining a bit more about the characters and how they were coming into their own. And the fact that, they already have these character kind of archetypes, but they are evolving because they're still only they're supposed to be teenagers, obviously, kind of thing. Yeah. So I thought that was a cool little moment to have them come together as characters. I'm not sure if the stuff with Leonardo and Raphael quite landed, because I think out of all the Turtles, maybe Leonardo had the shortest shrift, which is bizarre because he's supposed to be the leader. But I think maybe they looked at him and went, he's probably the most boring. So, the emphasis... Yeah, I felt like the emphasis was very much on Michelangelo for laughs and Raphael because he's a hothead.
That's it. Well, yeah, Raphael was the catalyst of most of the story.
Yeah.
He loses his sight, he tries to get it back. This is what, he is the catalyst for it to begin.
He's the one who goes on the quote-unquote journey, isn't he? In this film.
Because he gets his ass handed to him, as you said already. There's that line where they say, where's Raphael? And they say, it'll drop in a minute, and then he falls through, being...
It's a great scene, man.
Yeah, really and then obviously, like you said, then they go to the farm, which probably had to be North Carolina at that point.
100% North Carolina.
And you've got as you've already said, April is talking about them, and you got that really good scene with Donatello and Casey Jones in the band. And we haven't said enough. Casey Jones, he doesn't carry the film. He carries his part. Elias Koteas carries his part, Casey Jones, to perfection. I love him in this. He is just...
Oh, he's great. By the way, the other person up for the role was Keanu Reeves. Just popped into my head. Yeah, there you go.
Do you know who he is in this? He is Jack Burton. You've already said Big Trouble in Little China.
Yeah,
he is. In his mind, he's the hero. In everyone else's mind, he is the sidekick. But
he's the buffoon,
fantastic line as well that just sets up that he is just a bit of a sleazebag. When
no doubt.
When they're talking, and she's on about, I need to call my boss, and I'm going to forget his name, but he goes, "Oh, Jerry. Oh, no worries. He left you a voice message on your burning answer machine. You're fired." Yeah. So it's cool. You dodged that bullet.
Yeah. He's obviously just got no tact at all.
Yeah.
I mean, I did find the scene when he suddenly gives her essential bad back rub while the turtles watch a little bit bizarre. And again, didn't help the fact that she wasn't wearing a bra, so it just made it all a little bit a bit sexier than it needed to be. But I tell you what, she is maybe the unsung hero of this film, Judith Hoag as April. Because
she's carrying a lot of the weight.
So good, and her I spoke earlier about the fact that the turtles are able to emote surprisingly well, but so much of that depends on the human interacting with them, and she is so good interacting with the turtles. You totally buy into over the short period of time, and she does get over the fact that she's talking to talking anthropomorphic turtles, and everybody, by the way, in this film gets over the giant talking rat very quickly. But whatever, we'll get to that later. But she really adds that human element to this film, and I think she's absolutely fantastic. And you could already see that's where the sequels went off the rail, because they replaced her with, I think the actress's name was Paige Turco.
I love Paige Turco, mind.
Oh, really? See, I love Judith Hoag. She's so my kind of girl.
Yeah, just Paige Turco. I had a bit of hots for Paige Turco. I still do. I think Paige Turco.
That's weird, isn't it? You're the hots for Paige Turco, and I totally had the hots for Judith Hoag. That's the thing with this podcast. We either 100% agree or 100% disagree. So we even have different Aprils. We had crushes.
There is no middle ground yet.
But I guess for me, because I always associated so much with the role, I already thought with the sequels as because I didn't know about the fact that she didn't necessarily get on with the developers of the film, and she was quite outspoken and stuff. Maybe that's why she wasn't.
There was a 6-day shoot as well. She didn't I don't think the film was shot in 6 days, but there was something about the fact she was very outspoken about a 6-day shoot, and it felt really rushed. But I've tried to find further information about what they meant by 6-day shoot, but it wasn't saying. I don't think the film. I think she was just. There was no way the film was shot in 6 days. So.
No. I think she meant 6-day weeks. I think the problem was, I think she thought they were doing too much work, and I think I mentioned earlier the fact that the stunt team weren't obviously they're not unionized in America. That's why a lot of those early Hong Kong action movies look so good, because they were really getting their ass whipped because they had no one to go to complain. And that was the thing. These guys were getting injured, they were getting sent back, and obviously she was the one voicing off. And I think they were just listen, man, we've got a limited time, limited budget, we just can't deal with it. But despite the fact this sounds like she was very much in the right, but I thought it was a loss for the series. But
Judith Hoag, she was in Armageddon, wasn't she? She was in Armageddon,
yeah. She's been in a lot of high-profile films.
Yeah, she was the mother of Will Patton's son.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, again, I hate... going on to Armageddon, I hate those kind of parents that are shown on screen. No, you're not going to see your son. No, you're not going to see your daughter. No, I don't want you having anything to do with them. Oh, wait, now this person saved the world, and they're going, that's your daddy. That's your daddy, because he saved the world. Same with fucking...
Daddy's got a little bit of coin now, methinks. I can see a book deal coming.
Holly Gennaro. Oh, no, call me Holly McClane, now he saved us. Or, again, the daughter, because she went by whatever her name was.
Gennaro,
yeah. But she went by it, and then at the end, when she's introducing herself, oh yeah, he's just saved me now. Dad's just saved me, so now I'm a McClane again. Like, fuck off. Just stop.
Come on now.
I know.
I maybe they're only just realizing what he does for a living or something. But yeah, some of these women in these, and it's unfair of them because, as much as we love 80s, 90s films, a lot of the female roles are poorly written.
Yes.
But I will say in this, I think she's good. I think she's surprisingly well written. Like, she's proactive in this. Like, she's a pain in the ass. She gets fired because she carries
a lot of the weight of the film.
She really does. The narrative,
and she gets all the meatier dialogue as well, because obviously you don't want to have, as much as it's a Turtles film, you can't really have the Turtles on the film 99% of the time, because it's just not going to be feasible because of the animatronics. So you have to have somebody carry this film a lot. So it's April O'Neil's investigation. It's her meeting up with the Turtles. It's her, as you've already said, narrating their journey in the farm. It's the end as well. It's all about, and she just carries it really well.
It has that emotional connection to the Turtles. It's not just them living in their own little world. It's their connection to the human world. Yeah. And it's such an important kind of relationship for the movie to work. And it's pulled off so well. And I think so much of that don't get me wrong, that combination of obviously guys in the suit, animatronics on top, and then being voiced by somebody else. Like, there's numerous layers. Like, if you actually, there's an alternative ending to this film. I'm not sure if you've ever seen it, where she goes to a publisher at the end, and she's trying to sell the concept of the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles as a comic book. So very kind of meta. Yeah. And she's there talking to the guy, and he's like, Turtles? And I think it's more of a kind of comment on the fact that they couldn't get the movie made, of course, because he's like, it sounds like too far-fetched. And of course, the Turtles then are in the window outside, like poking their head in, and she starts laughing and stuff. But then what it does is it cuts to Michelangelo, and Michelangelo makes a joke, but it's the guy in the suit's voice. And you're like, it sounds fucking terrible. It's kind of like when you see those outtakes of Darth Vader, and you're like, why does Darth Vader sound like a fucking brummie? What the hell's going on?
I thought he was Scottish.
Yeah, but that's what I mean. There's so many layers, and it'd be so easy for there to be a disconnect between April and the Turtles, and instead it's anything but. And I think that is obviously the Shredder, Splinter relationship with them is very important as well. But it's much more service, relatively straightforward. Yeah. Whereas hers, I think, is the more complex one. And I think that's what makes the movie sing.
Have you ever thought as well about why turtles? I mean, like, what if it was alligators or goldfish, or like, because
could have.
You got the alligator zoo. Like, there was always the stories, wasn't there? I mean, we got it from films mainly, but I don't know if that was actual stories that floated around America a lot. But people having alligators bought for them as presents and then being flushed down the toilet. So there's alligators living in the sewers and things like that. I mean, like, it's mad that it was turtles. Do you know what I mean? Like,
well, it comes back to that initial, like, how they were conceived, the idea. And it comes back to, obviously, Kevin Eastman and Peter Laird. Basically, they were just sitting around together, and they're a weird relationship because instead of looking like friends, as my wife put it, because we were watching an interview with them afterwards, they look like father and son. Like, one looks so much older than the other. But they were just saying, like, one of them just thought, like, I was just drawing a turtle as a ninja. And it was, like, straight away. Like, if you draw a goldfish as and in fairness, like, it can look cool. Like, the guy who does the artwork for us, Darry Fletcher, you should totally check out his work. He's done like a bunch of what if comics for us, and one of them is like, what if they were goldfish instead? And it looks cool, but it looks funny rather than cool. Whereas you see those original drawings from, usually. Sorry, I will get to the point. When you have the originals, like, you think of like The Simpsons or Family Guy, when you go back and watch the first season of Family Guy, the first season of The Simpsons, etc., they often look a little bit rough around the edges. Yeah. And the actual imagery of what you think of them becoming kind of comes in over a number of seasons. With this, you look at their original drawings, and it was straight off the bat, these are the Turtles. And those original drawings totally still look amazing. They totally stand up. And I think it was just that look. Like, I think if you'd drawn a goldfish, you would have been like, oh, that looks funny, move on. Because he drew a turtle, and the way they drew it, they're like, wait, no, this looks cool as shit. Why does this? And I think they had a competition where he drew a Ninja Turtle, and he's like, oh, check this out. And then it went from Kevin to Peter, and he was like, oh, I'll draw my version. And I think it was just like a refinement, like a creative process between the two of them. And they ended up with, the fact of the matter is, like you said, you would never guess that a Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtle would look cool until they drew it, and they're like, holy shit. That looks amazing. And they were so surprised that they went out and to create their own comic book.
I love it as well, because obviously they sold the rights on and stuff like that as well. But they came back and teamed up to do what is becoming one of my favorite comic book series at the moment. The Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, The Last Ronin. I don't know if you know anything about it.
I am aware. I've seen I love the art style.
The art style is fantastic. And the story is... So basically, it's about Shredder's offspring killing all the turtles, and there's one turtle left, but he no longer wears the mask, so you're not aware which turtle it is. And then it's set in like it's kind of like Old Man Logan.
Yeah, that's exactly what I was thinking.
It's set in that future where the turtle's on his way out, and you've got an older April O'Neil. It's the dystopian one. Yeah, it's very. If you get a chance, wait until maybe the run has ended. But if you get a chance, it is absolutely fantastic.
Well, it's weird, isn't it? Because most of these, again, the kind of narrative route I guess most of these creative properties take is that, often they become they start quite lighthearted. Like you can imagine it starting as the cartoon as we knew it in the 80s. And then it becomes, people like take the IP and then they run with it. And as they become older, like, I want to do something darker, more interesting. It's weird with this because it started dark. Like if you go back and look at that original comic, it's like, they kill foot soldiers. Like they don't have swords to slap people with or bitch slap, as you so succinctly put it. They're using those swords to stab and maim people.
They're using the pokey end, which is what they should be doing.
The pokey end is getting used all the time. So it is weird, and it does make for an interesting film because, again, I think when we all think of the Turtles, especially people our age, we do naturally go back to the cartoons, and it's that day-glow color palette. And you go back and look at this and you go, wow, this has nothing to do with the cartoons. And it's because it didn't. It was based on the comic book. And it was so dark that they didn't even make toys based on it. You think about, like, when I was younger, the toys were the biggest thing in the world. And there were no toys based on the movie because
it was all based on the TV show.
It was all based on the TV show.
I remember I had them all. I had the party bus. I had the blimp where you actually...
Oh, the bus makes an appearance in this. Like, she had, again, very briefly for one sequence. I was like, oh, that's a VW. But without all the fucking paint on it. But I'm not sure if it was the same with you. Maybe it's just like year difference. But I mean, we've talked about it on previous podcasts, the fact that we didn't have that cultural phenomenon like during, like Star Wars was already a thing, and Harry Potter, Lord of the Rings, they came when we were grown up. And even most of the stuff I loved growing up, I'm sure it's the same with you. You think of He-Man, Transformers, Thundercats, they were already out by the time we were kids. Like when I was buying He-Man toys or Thundercat toys, they'd been out for 4 or 5 years. They were around. Yeah. I grew up around them, I suppose. This was the one that landed and became a cultural phenomenon. And I remember trying to get the toys was almost impossible. Like I have very vivid memories. One of them, the woman putting them on the shelf in W.H. Smith's in Cardiff. And I was like, Mum, you've got to let me get one. And I got Michelangelo because he was my favorite. And the other time, I was randomly on holiday in Weymouth, and all they had left was Splinter, because he was the one nobody wanted. Yeah. And I was like, oh, you've got to let me have a Splinter toy. So I got a feeling so big.
I got a feeling you couldn't get them because I had them all.
It sounds like you had the lot.
My Christmas once was all the Turtles. So, I'm opening the party bus, I'm opening the blimp, I'm opening all 4 Turtles.
That's the dream.
Splinter, Shred. I had them all, mate. I wish I kept them. Like I wish I had. Dude. Can you imagine if I?
You can get them. I don't want to spoil it because he might listen to this podcast. Oh, I'm going to tell him anyway. From my friend's birthday, because recently, like we all turned. Well, 2 of us turned 40, but some of us turned 40 in a couple of months. I bought one of my friends like the retro version of He-Man, and we were talking about doing this film, and he said, "Oh, make sure." Remember, I'm Donatello, because Donatello was always his favorite. And I was like, I've got to see if you can get a Donatello figure. And Donatello, you can get like rebrands of the... Oh, yeah, that's the He-Man. Sorry, he's just putting the camera at the original He-Man. That's the exact one.
The one's on my wall, yeah.
Yeah, the one's on his wall. But I checked online, and you can buy. They're basically just similar to that, reprints of the original Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles. So I was like, I've got to get them Donatello. Same with like the same figures, the same what are they? Accessories. Jesus Christ, because they had very unique accessories.
Yeah.
So I was like, that is.
They're basically just. I think they're the reprints that on the original cards that they would have been sold when they were sold in the 80s and stuff. That's where, because randomly I found these in B&M.
I saw them in B&M as well.
So
you can get them in Amazon and stuff. But my actual favorite ones, I think they're called Super 7. So basically, what they do is take ostensibly what your memory is of those toys. So say you were like, oh, I remember Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, I remember Thundercats, but what they do is produce them in the same kind of boxes, but the toys are better, but in a subtle way. So they basically live up to your memories of the toys, because quite often, of course, once you're presented with the toys as they were in the 80s, you're like, oh man, I remember this being a little bit better than it was, especially if you look back at like Thundercats and stuff. But yeah, those figures, those reprints where they basically just say, oh, this is the toy that you had as a kid, but it's kind of built by today's standards. They're fucking dope. They are dope. It's all the memories, but without any of the disappointment, basically.
Bringing the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles toy podcast to an end and going back to the film for a minute. I had
to do eventually.
I love the narrative style of like the difference between Splinter and Shredder. Like Shredder considered, even though he's like we've already said, he's dressed like a tin can, but he's a man in this, and that's like he sees himself as a man. Everything else, like Splinter, is a freak, but it's all about what's on the inside. And then all of a sudden, like it's the way Splinter speaks to the Foot Clan, the kids who were just looking for a home, the kids who were just looking for guidance. So they sought guidance with Shredder, which was wrong. And then Splinter just basically leads them down, I guess what you want to say is the right path. And it's really good. And it's one of those things, well, you get it all the time. I think one of the bigger ones was the Toxic Avenger. Like on the outside, the Toxic Avenger looks like he looks, which is a freak. But on the inside, he's a really lovely man who has a mop. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, he does have a mop. I mean, again, if you want to like look back at like great 80s posters, the Toxic Avenger has an absolutely fantastic poster. The movie, not so hot, but the poster, absolutely baller. 100%.
That's a James Gunn thing as well. I think he wrote Toxic Avenger, or he was on like part of the creation.
Oh, the original, yeah.
Yeah, James Gunn's a trauma kid. So he's
really
he's from Traumaville, yeah. Anyway, sorry, moving on. But yeah, I think it's done really well in this, because it can be clunky, that whole beautiful on the inside thing, but delivered.
Well, yeah, because you do see it, and if you remove the fact that they're turtles, basically what you have are a bunch of teenagers who are being taken down the right path by Splinter, somebody who genuinely cares for them. And of course, that whole thing about, ninjutsu being used, any martial art being used to protect people, but not to use it in anger. Whereas obviously Splinter is taking these kids, God damn it, Shredder is taking these kids in and doing the complete opposite. It's like the Karate Kid. It's Cobra Kai versus Miyagi-Do karate. Yeah. It's basically just that, but with a giant rat and Shredder instead.
I want your version, right? Because you've said it so many times now. It's not a mistake. You have seen a different version to everyone else. You have seen the version where Shredder raised the turtles and Splinter was part of the Foot Clan.
I know.
You've done it more. Up. Like, it's not even just one slip up now. You've done it several times.
I've got it wrong pretty much every single time. And the problem is, once you get it wrong 3 or 4 times, you start overthinking it and then kind of incorrectly correcting yourself, if that makes sense. So yeah, I'm never going to get perfectly correct.
So I want to see your version where the turtles end up being the bad guys raised by Shredder. That'd be quite cool.
Well, I guess so, and all the other, and they just, but again, do you want a bunch of turtles just going around stabbing teenagers? And again, innocent teenagers. I don't think we want to see that one, to be honest.
I don't know. I want that, along with, from the sequel, Vanilla Ice's "Go Ninja, Go Ninja, Go Ninja, Go."
Oh my God, what gets that in music? But that is a rough sequence. Again, in Legacy, obviously the subsequent films, and the fact that I thought that they went down the wrong path, but whatever, it is what it is. But I mean, with this film, I guess in terms of like wrapping up, I guess we have to get to like the big finale. And I say big finale, but again, as we mentioned earlier, the fact that Shredder is just kind of this presence in the background, but I never really feel any connection between him and the Turtles. He's just a bad guy. No. So you have this big fight at the end, and it just doesn't really land as it should.
Speaking of landing, they're on a rooftop. Where is he jumping from? Because when he arrives, he's landing.
Oh, he just appears, and and Splinter got it right this time. Splinter appears not only out of nowhere, but with a sound effect. Like, he gets everyone's attention by landing from somewhere. What the fuck? It's really bizarre, because obviously Shredder has is it by that point Leonardo like pretty much dead to rights?
Yeah,
and all the Turtles have to throw their weapons. Like, oh my god, he's going to kill Leonardo, and then he's just going to stab the rest of the Turtles. But no, Splinter comes from nowhere. I had to think about it then, and as I said, it's bizarre because he makes a sound effect when he lands. It's an odd sequence, and as I actually think it might be the weakest part of the film. And as you already alluded to earlier, most of the effects in this film stand up pretty well. But the bit when Splinter throws Shredder off the roof,
yeah,
it just looks a little bit ropey. Although I will say this, it's a fucking dark ending. Like, yeah, Shredder has fallen off the roof into a trash compactor, and then Casey Jones turns it on, crushes him.
So you're on about no murder stuff. Casey Jones straight up murders that guy.
100% murders him. 100, and let's not make a mistake. Like, everyone calls him Shredder, but Oroku Saki, he had a name. Oroku Saki, he's a human being.
Sounds like a drink.
Just crushes him. It does sound like a drink.
Yeah,
but yeah, make no mistake. Casey Jones flat out murders.
Yeah,
like, there's every chance he comes off the roof, falls into the rubbish. There's every chance that he's still alive, maybe even conscious, and then he has to live with the, oh my god, I'm being crushed to death in a trash compactor. That is dark as fuck.
Although, spoilers, he does survive.
He does survive, and we will get to that. Well, let's go straight to Legacy now, then, if we're going to talk about it, because it's obviously, in terms of legacy, it's got a huge legacy. And there are a few IPs out there which have remained as consistently popular as the Turtles. Like, the Turtles, because this goes back to 1986, 1987, the original cartoons. It's never gone away. Obviously, it's had peaks and troughs and stuff, but it's always been in the cultural kind of awareness, I suppose.
So I think,
because of video games, because of comics, like the cartoons on Nickelodeon, which came years after, obviously the aforementioned Michael Bay movies. It's just never gone away.
Well, it's the same as Star Wars. You will always get a generation of Turtles, like you get a generation of Star Wars. Like,
even Star Wars went away for, I would say,
but that's what I'm saying. But you always have, like, if you said it during the Phantom Menace, that there's a different generation. That's their Star Wars. The Force Awakens stuff now, the new generation, this is their Star Wars. Same with Turtles. Our generation, that's my Turtles, your Turtles, are the original 1980s TV show and this film. Like,
100%, yeah.
Unfortunately, people are getting the Michael Bay one, but you're going to get a new generation again because
the Nickelodeon show's been really popular. I think it's well received, but we didn't watch it.
There's two films coming out probably end of this year, next year. One by Seth Rogen. Yeah, so one by Seth Rogen, and then a Nickelodeon one, I think. So yeah. So there's a live action one coming by Seth Rogen, and so it's always going. You're always going to get Turtles, and like you said, I've already said about The Last Ronin that you're always going to get comics. You're always going to get the cartoons. You're always going to get
video games.
It's video games, yeah. It's fantastic. Yep. Oh my god, the NES video game. We'll get to that in video game section, but we'll move.
Oh, awesome! But I mean, just remember, like, as good as there have been great cartoons based on this in the last 20 years. There's obviously, as you mentioned, there's been fantastic comic books. The movies weren't fantastic because they were both different directors. It was Jonathan Liebesman and I think Dave Green directed the second one. But what they really feel like are Michael Bay films, and they're both produced by Michael Bay. They look like Michael Bay films.
Are you on about the 2014 and
2016? Yeah, they're not fantastic. But neither were the sequels to this film, because again, there was a pretty big backlash.
I beg to differ.
Man, they took all the Secret of the Ooze is to this film what Ghostbusters 2 is to Ghostbusters 1. It's not a terrible, terrible film, but they looked at it and instead of this film, you can feel it. It's based on the comic books, whereas the second film is based so much on the cartoon. Yeah. And it's like they've overreacted to the fact that this film was dark. And you notice even in the fight sequences, they start using yo-yo. They're like, oh, we can't use these weapons,
but that's
so they use stuff around them.
Like Michelangelo, there was a big thing about the nunchucks because they were easy to make. There was a big thing about them in the UK.
Oh, they were banned in the UK around the time.
Everyone, so obviously they're on his person, but Michelangelo doesn't really use his nunchucks. And the fact that
uses them. And
they weren't allowed the rights to Bebop and Rocksteady, so they had Tokat and Razor or whatever their names were.
Yeah, they're like you said, it is very much the Ghostbusters 2 way. Like Ghostbusters 2, instead of feeling like a direct sequel to the first film, felt like part of it was intertwined with the fact that it'd become this huge cultural phenomenon, that had become popular with kids, that the real Ghostbusters was a thing at that point. And it's the same as this. Instead of being a sequel to the movie, which was tied to the comics, suddenly they're trying to tie into the cartoon, which by that point was absolutely massive. So it ends up making this weird film. And don't make no mistake, before you go defending The Secret of the Ooze, The Secret of the Ooze does have Ninja Rap by Vanilla Ice in it.
Yes.
So, it does have quite a bit to answer for. Although I was admittedly rapping Ninja Rap this morning in the street, and my wife told me off, and I was like, wait, I can do that. I'm white, he was white. She goes, yeah, that's the problem, you look too much like Vanilla Ice. You do look doing that in the street.
Yeah, you do look like you're white, you're Vanilla Ice. You do look like
I've got like the fucking the hair. I mean, yeah, it was a bad look.
They rushed it as well though, didn't they? Because like you said, it was really the original was released in 1990. This came out in 91. So it was literally they just went, okay, this looks like it's going to be big, right? Let's get one out, but we want it out now. So it was very much rushed. But watching it, it's by no means good, but it's still enjoyable. And I would rather watch an enjoyable shit film than having to rewatch anything with Will Smith in again. I'm dying on this hill, dude. Like, honestly,
Jesus Christ. Like I said, a bizarre and lonely hill. I'm sure it's dying. But no, like I said, it's a comparison. And I'm not saying Secret of the Ooze is as good as Ghostbusters 2. That's that same kind of vibe. In the same way that Turtles isn't as good as Ghostbusters. But in terms of that drop off in quality, the films, they feel like they lose that kind of the tonal impact that the first films have. And they're lesser. They kind of go for it's broader comedy, and I think the film pays for it. And obviously they go even further down that road for the third film, Turtles in Time, which was basically just a rip off of the arcade game at that point.
That was terrible.
And that was terrible.
And so they did Casey Jones very dirty in that film. Like poor Elias Cortez.
I can't even remember.
So he came back, and like Casey Jones has basically just become a babysitter in that film. I mean, he got to play like Casey Jones's ancestor, who was apparently But it's a terrible film. But again, I'd rather watch that than any Will Smith. No,
it's crazy. But no, I mean, like we're saying, there's films coming out, 2 films coming out in the next year or so. I mean, the most interesting of the 2 for people our age is definitely the Seth Rogen-led CGI reboot in 2023. Yeah. But it's just to prove that point that the Turtles have legitimately never gone away. Their popularity has never waned to any great degree. And you can see that in the video games. I mean, this year alone, there's the Cowabunga collection, which looks absolutely amazing. I mean, you've already mentioned there the NES game, which was one of the highest selling NES games of all time, despite the fact that it was fucking nailed.
Solid.
It was a really well-made game. Yeah. They could have easily just made a cash-in game, but that film had that game had an overworld. You could play all the different characters. Yes, it was almost impossible, but it was a really good game made by Konami. And there was a whole bunch of them. Like the arcade game was one of the most technologically advanced things I'd ever seen in 1991 or whatever it was. And, you think of like Turtles in Time. All these are, again, they're all going to be on this re-release Cowabunga collection. It's also going to have the arcade fighting game and the Game Boy games. These were all massive in our youth. And not only that, there's Shredder's Revenge, which is being made by Tribute Games, and it's very much a throwback to that side, like a modern take on the side-scrolling beat 'em up, but with the Turtles. But it's got like that kind of classic, like I guess you'd say 16-bit / arcade style visuals. Yeah, and it's like both of those are coming out in the next few months. So yeah, they're as popular as ever. And the problem is, now I'm thinking, what do I want to see in a Turtles game? But I'm just like, I think that is exactly what I want to see. I want to see somebody re-release the games from my youth, and I want to see somebody reimagining it for a modern audience. I'm getting them both in the next few months.
Well, that's it, because I was thinking about the same thing, and there's been so many that is touched on so many genres. I don't think there's anything I could say that I'd want to see that would differ from what we're getting or what we've got. And like I said, I just want to see maybe a completable version of of the NES game.
Well, this will be completable, because what it'll have being a kind of, obviously, a retro collection is you'll be able to pause, rewind, and forward and stuff. So you'll be able to take a bajillion goes rather than losing 3 lives and having to start again and put your head through a wall. So theoretically, we'll all actually be able to complete Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, the NES version, which is a miracle. But the strange thing with this is, if it didn't already exist, if you said, what would be my perfect turtle game? It would be a 4-player action game created by Platinum Games. And Platinum Games created a 4-player turtle games, which on paper sounded like the perfect turtle games, and it's turned out to be an absolute turd. So what the fuck, man? So my dream turtle game already exists, and it's a massive disappointment. So instead, I'm going to put all my faith in Tribute Games' Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles Shredder's Revenge, which looks absolutely dope, and the nostalgic glow of the Cowabunga collection. So I feel like I'm getting everything I want. So no complaints there.
So we've kind of done this in reverse. We've gone legacy and we've gone video games. So we need to go back to love and hate. So
yes, we really have jumped ahead.
Yeah, so I'll go with my 3 loves first. So like I said, I've already said that the way April O'Neil carries the film, I think I think Judith Hoag is fantastic in this. I do prefer Paige Turkle, but that's from a prepubescent teenage boy point of view more than,
and from a man who doesn't like Will Smith. So trust him if you will. I think he's out of his fucking mind, if you ask me.
I've got a message, but we'll get to that at the end. I've got a message from one of our listeners, but we'll get to that in a minute. If you're going to go on about Will Smith,
can't wait.
What else did I love? The look of the Turtles, I think, is fantastic for 1990. For the animatronics, I think it's great. And I've always been a fan of Elias Koteas, even though I cannot pronounce his name. I think he was really good as Casey Jones. I think he was really good as Casey Jones, So that's my 3.
Yeah, I mean, for what jumps out to me, definitely Jim Henson's design of the Turtles. I think they still look absolutely fantastic, and I think that animatronic style and the suits hold up today. To the choreography, which was better than I remember. I think the action sequences, while obviously kind of not going over the line to the point where you're getting blood and stuff, I think it has an impact. And, I keep coming back to that fight scene on top of April's apartment where Raph really does get beaten up. You're like, oh, this is for real, And I guess that leads into number 3, the kind of the often ill-fitting balance between realism and absurdity. Like they're trying to, I think I mentioned it in the podcast that this very much is the Batman Begins of the Turtles film. They're trying to put the Turtles in the real world. And of course, that does occasionally clash against the absurdity of the premise, but for the most part, it works. And I am going to sneak in number 4. Yes, April O'Neil. God, I love her. I still think she's super cute. So yeah, totally on board. What about hate, sir? Hate.
So Danny, like I know Danny's the introduction into the world.
He's so
of
ginger.
The
He's so ginger.
Right. You can die on that hill, right? You can die on that hill. But he's just a whiny bitch. Like, he's just so whiny. Like, stop, dude. Yeah, so like not a huge fan of Danny. Not a huge fan of Shredder. Like, he's just like, because that doesn't. Shredder is just, he's a monster in all the literature. Like he is, but in this, he's weird. He's grooming.
Well, that is the problem. I mean, we mentioned at the top of the podcast, it's never quite clear what Shredder's trying to achieve. Usually in a film like this, you think, it'd all be about Shredder's master plan, but we never get an idea of it. And that's why it ends up feeling like this Oliver Twist Fagin situation. So yeah, it's a shame because I actually think Shredder looks cool in this film, but the character and we just mentioned the fact that final battle should be this big climatic battle between the Turtles and Shredder, and it just doesn't have any impact because you're like, why does anyone care? It's bizarre.
And finally, we've already said it, the fact that there doesn't seem to be any reason why they're stealing all this stuff. They're not selling it on. They're just keeping it all together. It's like they're raising a bunch of kleptomaniac ninjas. It's really
they're like
weird.
Magpies.
Yeah. It's insane.
It is bizarre.
So that's my 3.
3, number 1, the flashbacks, and they might work on a narrative level, but they look absolute dog shit and totally age the film. Sam Rockwell's goatee is absolutely unforgivable. It's the worst goatee I think I've ever seen on screen. And number 3, with a bullet, Casey Jones and April's relationship, which I just do not buy into. They're totally creepy. He's the worst. I mean, I like Casey Jones, but not as boyfriends. Maybe it's just because I wanted to date April O'Neil. I don't know, but I just do not buy into their bullshit relationship.
Basically, the only reason you don't like him is because he's competition.
Pretty much.
I just realised as well. Actually, no. I was going to say you haven't mentioned your wife in this podcast, but you have because she told you to stop being Vanilla Ice. I was going to say, is the reason why you haven't mentioned your wife in this podcast because it's all about April O'Neil.
Yeah, I'm just obsessed with April O'Neil all of a sudden. Let's just move on. So anyway, facts.
Facts.
Again, there's a bajillion for this film, and we will always caveat that we're going to handpick a few.
We've gone on forever on this podcast as well, so I'm narrowing these down, and I'm not going to repeat anything that we've already covered, which is we've covered quite a few.
Yeah, all mine have already been covered. The Daredevil stuff.
Yeah.
The Marvel... there was stuff about the Marvel comics. In the Marvel comics, the Turtles' origin story is actually directly linked to Daredevil, with a canister that it hits Matt Murdock.
That's right.
Matt Murdock making him blind before falling into the sewers and turning the Turtles into the Turtles. So, yeah, there is, in the Marvel comics version at least, a direct link between the Turtles and Daredevil, which I actually thought was pretty cool.
So I did mention the fact that the cement factory where their hideout was used in The Crow. It was Top Dollar's nightclub in The Crow. And I said there was another film and I couldn't remember what it was.
Sorry, it's just dawned on me again. His name was Top Dollar.
Top Dollar.
It's just, and then if you haven't seen The Crow, who the character is, he looks like the least top dollar of all. It's bizarre. It's bizarre. I do apologize.
That's all right. So the other film is we'll see if we can notice it because, spoiler alert, we are covering this soon. It's the location for Dino Hatton in Super Mario Brothers.
Oh my God. Yes, we are going to cover that soon for our sins.
So, and I'm pretty sure we've covered most of these. John Pace as Raphael is the only actor who physically portrays and voices the same turtle. All the other turtles are portrayed by both body and voice actors. Mm-hmm. When Raphael get knocked into the trash can by Casey Jones, the face and the animatronics inside the head caved in and broke the stuntman's nose. As Raph gets up from the trash can, he can be seen grabbing his nose area before the shot cuts. Raph's original stuntman is replaced by one of the foot soldier stuntman named Ken Scott. Ken did a lot of the major scenes as a foot soldier, including the nunchuck face-off against Michelangelo.
That was a cool scene.
All three newswomen are named after a month: April, May, and June.
Yeah, I thought that was pretty cool. I didn't even read that up. I was just like, we were watching the film. I was like, wait, she's May? And then later on, I was like, okay, yeah, it's a thing. She's called June. Fair enough.
And just editor Sally Menk, primarily known for collaborating with Quentin Tarantino, made her feature film debut working on this film. But they kind of told her they didn't like where her editing style was going, so they asked her to leave the editing room. And now she works with Quentin Tarantino, so that's quite interesting.
Fantastic.
And that's me done. So I guess
well, it's a weird thing, isn't it? Because when you think of this film, for instance, you never think of like the director. Like Steve Barron was the director, and he's had such a weird eclectic career. Like
3 years after this, he did Coneheads.
He did Mike Bassett, England manager. He's done music videos for David Bowie and Dire Straits. It's a weird mix. Mike Bassett, England manager, and I think it was only like 4 or 5 years ago, the lesser-known Mike Bassett, interim manager, with the same guy from the Royal Family.
Yeah.
So yeah, that was by the same director as well. The director of Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles. What a strange world we live in. The last thing we need to mention is the soundtrack. Obviously, we've already mentioned Ninja Rap from the sequel, but this is equally bizarre. Turtle Power, totally casual, TURTLE powered by Partners in Crime. That's crime with a KRYME. Because remember, this is the early 90s, and this is the era of the positive, upbeat rap music, i.e. rap music for crackers from the suburbs. But one of the things you'll notice, and I do love it, that it was a thing around this time.
You said words then. I didn't know what you were talking about.
It was all on point, don't worry about it. Is, you think, again, to reference Ghostbusters 2 again, that was another film that had one of those weirdly upbeat, white-friendly, I guess, rap songs. But a lot of these songs, basically what they did was just recap the movie. And this song does it, but it recaps the movie incorrectly. In the song for the film, he refers to Raphael as being the leader of the gang. He absolutely isn't. It's Leonardo. And references on numerous occasions the fact that April gets abducted by Shredder when she doesn't. That's Splinter. Yes. So, yeah, it's this bizarre thing where basically he's had a Post-it note saying, we're going to do a movie about the Turtles. Do you want to do the rap song? He's like, yeah, do you want to know what happens here? Nah, I can figure it out. And just goes off and does his thing. So, yeah, if you go back and listen to the lyrics, and don't get me wrong, the song is an absolute banger. A lot of it just isn't accurate to the movie. It's quite bizarre. But yeah, that's pretty much it. So I guess let's scores and recommendations.
So, I mean, I went back and rewatched it. I watched it numerous times before. I always enjoy watching this film. There are things that let it down a bit, but me personally, it's still a 4-star film. The fact that it was an independent film that did so well, and it led to 2 banging sequels, I say that with a smile on my face.
Yeah, damn straight. No. It was amazing and good because it really almost got shut down. Like I think New Line stepped in at the last minute and provided a little bit of funding. It was still independent, but New Line did step in. But this film just got by the skin of its teeth, and the fact that it exists and to the quality that it is almost a miracle.
Yeah. So it's a 4-star, and would I recommend it? Yes. But again, it's the caveat of you have to know your audience when recommending this. It's not the kind of film that you're going to recommend to just casual watchers or anything like that. But it is a decent film. If you want to see animatronics done right, if you want to see some good Jim Henson work, if you want to see some decent choreography with this, as you've said, it's definitely worth a watch. And yeah, Judith Hogue's in it, and so you're going to watch it.
Yeah, and she's great. Yeah, there's a lot of great performances. I agree with largely everything you said. I mean, I settled eventually on a 3-star, but a really good 3-star film. Like, I don't mean that as a criticism.
Would say like 3.5.
I might say 3.5 in fairness, but it's one of those like. I think it is a 3-star film, but a really enjoyable 3-star. You saying 4 stars, I'm not going to argue. I'm not going to like talk you down from that at all. But the fact of the matter is, without it ever being true, like an amazing film, it's a good film. And the fact that it's a good film almost feels like a miracle. And, you only have to look at the films that have come since and the disappointments we've had to deal with. This is still the definitive live action Turtles film for a reason. And as I said, I think tonally it's in the right spot. I think the animatronics are great. I think the performances are largely fantastic. Again, despite the fact that it's shot largely in North Carolina, it still looks really good. So, would I recommend it? Absolutely, especially to friends. Like one of those ones, if I've got a friend listening to this who's like, oh man, I love that film when I watched it in like 1992. It's like, there's no danger here. You can go back and watch this and still enjoy it because, even without the nostalgia, it's like, it's a decent film. Obviously, nostalgia adds to the fun, but this isn't like, you don't need your rose-tinted glasses for this film. If you liked it in 1992, you'll probably still like it now. But yeah, like you said, I'm not going to go tell my dad, oh, Dad, you have to go back. You haven't seen 1990s Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles? What the fuck? No, none of that nonsense. But 3 stars and definitely a recommendation. So, I think that's just next week, I suppose.
Well, that's Turtles. But before we move on to next week, we've had a message off one of our listeners.
No, if it's the one other person on earth who also doesn't like Will Smith, I don't want to fucking hear it.
Well, actually, it's kind of a bit of vindication for the both of us. So you're all right.
Okay. All right.
So it's from one of our listeners, Dan. He's always listening. He's always sending messages to us. So thanks for that, Dan. He's put, I do like Will Smith, but I have to agree with Rob. Goldblum is the better character in this film. So he's a fan of Will Smith, but as I said, Goldblum carries Smith in Independence Day. I agree with you and disagree with you. Like, I don't have any issue with somebody saying that Jeff Goldblum's the better character in Independence Day. I think Jeff Goldblum's fantastic in Independence Day. I don't think anyone carries Will Smith in this film. As I said, the scene when he's on his own dragging the alien through the desert, there's no one else around, and I'm convinced that is the moment that he became a superstar. I think they're both fantastic in this film. Flip a coin between who's better, but I don't think that lends any credence to the argument that Will Smith isn't a fantastically likable screen presence. I'm just not having it, dude. Not having it. I feel like you're clutching at straws. Not at all. Right. Anyway, come on. I'm excited to hear your choice for next week. What are we doing?
Well, next week is a strange one because it's a film I haven't actually seen, but I've owned the DVD for the best part of 10 years, and I've just never got around to it. And I thought, this is going to be my excuse. So we're going to watch John Carpenter's 1988 bonkers. I mean, most of his films are bonkers. But we're going to watch They Live, starring Roddy Piper. I can't talk too much about it because I haven't actually seen it yet. So I'm going to watch it next week, and it's going to be a really interesting conversation because I feel like you already have very strong opinions about this.
Can I just say, spoiler alert, you are in for a treat. Like, Buckaroo Banzai, The Wraith, They Live. Like, they're all up there in the pantheon of insane, but so good.
That was one of the things. I mean, obviously, it's fun going back and rewatching these movies, and I think it's important that at least one of us have seen these films. But those films you already mentioned, some of my favorite rewatchables, some of my favorite episodes have been the ones which I didn't know anything about. I mean, I know Roddy Piper's in this. I've seen the fight scene and stuff. But The Wraith, Buckaroo Banzai, those are films I knew very little about.
And I've
gone back and watched them, and I've had such a great time. And I love those films now.
I love that they were my choices. You'd never seen them. We chose it. You fell in love with them. I love the fact now you've come across a film that I think is up there with these two that you chose, but you haven't seen. I'm really.
You would have chosen it eventually, though.
It was on my list. It was on my list.
100%.
I am so looking forward to next week's episode. Honestly, this is
me too. Me too. I like I said, it's a film I've wanted to see for the longest time, and for reasons I can't even explain, I've just not got around to it. But I'm going to get around to it. So next week, 1988, John Carpenter. Classic? I don't know. I'll tell you next week. They live. But as always, thanks for joining us for this, Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles podcast. Please join us for They Live. And thanks, guys. Cheers. Oh, and before we forget, here is Rob with all the finer details. Got to get through those, dude.
Yeah, so basically you can find us on Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook at HeyYouGuys80s. We're also on email at HeyYouGuys80s@gmail.com. Please feel free to drop us any recommendations, any corrections or omissions we may have missed from any of the films that we've covered. Just get them in. And also, if you could, please leave us some 5-star reviews. That would really help us. And we'd like to thank, as always, Darry Fletcher at Darry Doodles for the fantastic artwork that we're now producing. Thanks for that, mate.
Cheers, Darry.
Yeah. And thanks again for listening, and we will see you next week.
Cheers. Bye. Hey, you guys!